Welcome to the Global Philanthropy Forum 2020. Hello, everyone. I'm Philip Young, CEO of World Affairs. I'm so pleased to be your new host for this year's Global Philanthropy Forum, or GPF, which is a long-standing project of World Affairs for us here in San Francisco. I wanted to welcome our 350 participants, all of whom are joining us virtually, beaming in around the world, 30 countries, for what is a timely and urgent conversation on climate change. I also wanted to thank all of you here listening for your flexibility with our technical issues. We're going to get this running, but I understand that we sent a link for you if you need to contact us and access this program. As a way to briefly set the stage, I've got these three words for all of us to keep in mind while we're together here. I want to say insight, action, and purpose. These words are the touchstones for me and the staff here at World Affairs and GPF. Insight, action, and purpose is what many of us yearn for in these difficult times of pandemic, social distress, and social unrest. And for us here in California, with the extreme wildfires and unbelievable smoke we're dealing with right now. Over the next 3 days, we have philanthropists and social entrepreneurs alike living in Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia, North America. They're crafting inventive solutions to climate change. And these amazing people will give you perspectives and insights. Their ideas will set the stage for us to come up with concrete actions we can take. And by working collaboratively with each other and with commitment, we'll create, I believe, a stronger community, one that gives us meaning and purpose to continue our efforts long after this conference adjourns. Indeed, by the end of the day, our 3 days here, you may very well find that an investment in battling climate change, for those of you who have not gone into this particular area at this point in your portfolios, this is the ultimate big bet. One last note, and before we move to our opening session, because we have a limited amount of time, I wanted to thank my predecessor, many of you who know very, very well, Jane Wales. GPF was an idea in the mind's eye of Jane some 20 years ago, and because of her driving vision and hard work, and the hard work of many of you here as well joining us, GPF is now a major platform for international philanthropy. And Jane, I know you're here, I know you're listening, guiding me in spirit. Thank you very much for everything that you've done for World Affairs and for supporting me personally. Now we're turned to Larry Kramer to talk about philanthropy's response to climate change. There he is. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Philip.
Larry Kramer is the president of the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, a leading world grant maker that supports many causes and institutions to create a better world. Larry personally has been a strong advocate for action on climate, and I think, therefore, is the perfect person to open this year's GPF. So, Larry, thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased and privileged to be here.
Thank you. So, let's get into it. You've done an incredible amount of writing on climate change, and one that specifically struck me was an article you wrote just in January 2020, and it's titled "Philanthropy Must Stop Fiddling While the World Burns." And given what's going on in California, I think that's quite apropos. I mean, it's an amazing title, and I guess many of you can guess where we're going on this. But before we get to that very clear message, I wanted to start out your train of thought, which I thought was quite interesting. You start out with a whole string of questions, and I think that's kind of apropos of you being really a law professor at heart. uh, so you ask us questions, the audience, the reader, and there are two in particular that are incredibly direct, almost startling, I would say. And I would like for you to answer those two questions first to start us off. So the first, you ask this question of all foundations, not only Hewlett, but everyone, all the funders who are joining us remotely now and others who may not be. And you ask them, you are saying that they themselves are at risk. So why do you ask that question?
So the starting premise is that everything that we do in philanthropy sort of rests on a foundation, and here I mean not foundation, but a base that presupposes some things about both the existence of a kind of stable democratic government and the existence of a physical environment that makes it possible to make long-term investments in all the things we do. And those things are themselves at risk because of this problem. So if that foundation goes away, everything else we're trying to do, whatever it is, becomes both impossible and will get undone. And I just wanted to start with that point because I think people really need to understand and accept it.
So go ahead. I mean, the second question you asked, which was as a follow-up to the first, and I'll just start it and then you can finish it and then continue to talk about that. You ask and then you get to the heart, what you say is really the heart of the matter for all of us to be thinking about. And is, what do foundation officers and directors believe will happen when?
And then I list, right, what are the well-accepted consequences of climate change, the kind of middle of the road view, not the extreme alarmist view, but what we're seeing happening now. So if you look around the world now, we're already seeing the beginnings of the droughts and the famines and the fires and the heat waves and the ocean rise and there's so many different things, and they come at us in news stories kind of one by one. And of course, they're driving things like migration. Syria was arguably, the Syrian migration was begun by a drought, and then the economic consequences of dealing with all those things. So what I wanted to say to people is, think about each of those things. Now imagine them all happening all at once in ways that are orders of magnitude larger and more frequent than what we're experiencing today. So, what do you think happens? I mean, that's a rhetorical question because, of course, what happens is, it's not that humanity becomes extinct, but it is that the social and political and economic systems will not be able to withstand those kinds of pressures. If you just think about what Syria did to Europe and global politics, that's something like 6 million people. What do you think happens when that number becomes 200 or 300 million people all moving at once, right? As nations try to protect their borders, and then you get wars, and the logical consequences, which are staring us in the face and not that distant in the future. So it's really a rhetorical follow-up to that first point. The foundations on which everything rests are at risk because of this problem. We have a chance to address it now before those things happen, but the window is closing. So that's what I meant by, we're fiddling while the world literally is beginning to burn.
Right. So let's then get to really what the thrust of your message in this article was, and the message that you've got that you have been using all the way through in your conversations with people about climate change. It sets the stage for this ultimate sort of point, which is slightly different from saying that climate change is important. I mean, we do talk about that, and you've talked about it, but instead it's about what foundations are actually doing with their resources, right? I mean,
right.
And why don't you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. So, I want to preface it with 2 points. One is, I think philanthropy, we sometimes over-exaggerate what we can do in the world. There are problems around which we can play at the margins, but we're not fundamentally the essential institution that's going to solve those problems. Climate is not one of those. What's clear is that there is a pivotal role for philanthropy to play, and that if it does not play that role, the chances of addressing climate are significantly reduced. Okay, so that's point one. And then point two is, philanthropy is just not playing that role. The resources from philanthropy and foundations in particular that are going to address this problem are minuscule, are considerably smaller than they need to be and ought to be for a problem that is as foundational as this one is. And so it's really to say, it's not just that climate change is important, it's that philanthropy has a pivotal role to play, and we're not playing it, and we need to step in and do that.
So then let's talk about what you were saying, 3%. I think we cited before it was like 2% of money, 3% of money. You're saying that you feel like we've got to be spending a lot more for what we got to be doing, right?
Yes, and I actually think it is probably closer to 2. I didn't want to get into fights with people about being inaccurate, so I went for 3%, which in the estimates is at the higher end. But we've done a lot more research since, and we think it's about 2% of both philanthropic philanthropy and overall philanthropy, if you also include individuals.
So what you're basically saying is, in this context of, and you're not exaggerating in the sense of, this is an existential issue that we've got. We're seeing the ramifications of it absolutely right now, and that then becomes a matter of, so your direct call to action. Let's do something, and then it becomes a matter of how. And it doesn't seem that you're arguing that all foundations should drop what they're doing, switch all their funding to climate change, are you?
No, not at all. I mean, that would also be foolish, right? The other things that we work on are important. We're trying to save the world for a world that we need to preserve also, so that it's there when we do. So I don't think anybody should necessarily drop all the things that they're doing, but they need to make space to help out on this problem as well, because this problem is those problems. Solving this problem is essential to the whatever goals they're trying to achieve in all the other areas in which they're working.
But so let me ask you, are you getting questions from people when you start making this call, and it's very firm and it's very, it's outspoken in many ways? And, given your perch being at the Hewlett Foundation, are people asking you the question, so why aren't you spending more? And then are you even thinking about spending down then?
Yes,
for something like this?
I get that question quite a bit, and I have a bunch of answers to that. Yeah. So one is, I want to model what I'm suggesting other people should do. I don't think the Hewlett Foundation should drop all the other things it works on any more than I think anybody else should, right? Those things are important, and we need to continue making progress on them, and we would not want to derail that. It's just that we don't have to while we also address this problem. Now, Hewlett, my second answer, of course, is Hewlett has been the largest global funder of climate since at least 2007. We put anywhere from 120 to 130 million dollars each year into the problem. So other funders, when they get into that ballpark, can begin to talk to us about the need to spend more, right? It's 25% to 30% of our total grant making. If other funders are in that ballpark, then I'm happy to entertain criticisms about us needing to spend more. But the truth is, we could spend a lot more. The amount of money that's needed is a lot more than Hewlett itself can spend alone. So it doesn't make sense to me to say, Hewlett, derail all the other things you're doing so that you can spend more and not make a significant difference in the climate problem, but undermine all the other things that you're working on. So instead, what I've tried to do and what we have tried to do is to say to other funders, we need all of you. We need orders of magnitude more funding in order to do this, because there are multiple routes to solving this problem. We can't be sure which one will work. We need to cover a lot of bases, and we can't possibly cover all those bases with the amount of resources that we have now. So we need you all to step in to a meaningful extent, but not to the extent that you have to surrender the other work that you're doing, just like we're doing. That's really the way I think about this.
So there are a couple of elements that I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you talked about how philanthropy can do certain things really well and certain things that it can't. Seems to me that that there is more than just money involved in this as well. Is there, money is one thing, giving people facts is one thing, but getting people to act is another. And I know that you are heavily involved in this climate leadership initiative. That's a collaboration that, is trying to get all these different groups of people to work together. Can you talk a little bit about that specifically and your strategy related to that?
Yeah, let me, again, one point before I come to the Climate Leadership Initiative, or CLI. Yeah. So what we need in addition to resources is human capital, right? We need the creativity and the ability to cover lots of ground that come from having lots and lots of different people engaged in the problem while collaborating with each other. It's really the uniqueness of collaboration is the ability to get coordination, but also the individual creativity and the opportunities to cover many different bases that come from having lots and lots of different people working on a problem. So that's what we need. No, go ahead.
No, so as a follow-up to that, I mean, is it only philanthropy? I mean, part of what we're talking about with a really what we call a wicked problem. I mean, government had their role, private sector had their role. Do you believe in collaboration among all three?
Sure. And the reason philanthropy has such a critical role to play here is that that's something that we really can contribute to, right?
Yeah.
We have the ability the unaccountability that we have allows us to step outside of a lot of the interests and short-termism that limits these other organizations and help put them in the position where they can act. I mean, that's and the resources in both private markets and governments vastly outstrip what philanthropy has. Our pivotal role, though, is in enabling that, and we need more philanthropic resources in order to enable that fully. So you can think of it as a kind of cascading growth in the resources and opportunities and things that can be covered globally.
So let's go then to the Climate Leadership Initiative. Who's involved? What does it do? And clearly this is an example of a collaboration that you're talking about. And I think, and then the larger strategy in this, it would be great.
Yeah, sort of. The climate leadership is actually a little different than that. When we realized that we needed to bring a lot more resources in, and we thought about why is there so little, part of it was not full recognition of the significance of the problem, but a lot of it is it just seems like such a big problem. People are like, I don't even know where to start in doing this. I can't get my arms around this. So I'm going to focus on something where I believe I can actually make a difference, where I understand what it is that I need to do. And so 6 funders got together and we stood up the CLI as an independent organization to essentially help recruit new funders and advise them on where they can start. So the organization itself is really a clearinghouse for information and advice. So if you're a new funder, it's like, I don't even know where to start. CLI will work with you. They will help you understand, here are the kinds of options that are there. Here are the kinds of things that are happening and the kinds of things that aren't, and work with you to find the place within this ecosystem that makes the most sense to you, where you can make a difference. So it's a way of getting funders up the kind of scale to the kind of ladder to scale much more quickly, because we really don't have time for people to take 8 to 10 years to figure out what they want to do on this problem.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, we got to talk about what's going on right now. We have pandemic, COVID-19. We have incredible economic distress. We have, Black Lives Matter, social unrest, all the things that are breaking out all over here in the United States. Have these events of the last several months changed your thinking, or perhaps refined your thinking on, specifically climate change, or generally your approach?
Yeah, I keep looking to the side because I'm looking at my window, which is of course covered in soot.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go wash it at some point here, but I figure we'll wait for the worst of it to pass before we start. So what I would say is, I mean, yes, of course, how could it not? And in multiple ways. I have a fear that grows out of this and a hope that grows out of this. The fear, of course, is that this problem, climate, is a problem, as I said, for all of the things that people care about, all those other things, wealth inequality, systemic racism, all of them are going to be vastly exacerbated by the pressures when they come, if we don't get this problem under control. And again, you can think of climate, it's like, if I drop a ball, it's going to take some time till it hits the ground. We can't wait till the ball hits the ground to work on this problem. We're dropping the ball literally right now. So we need people to work on it, precisely because of all the kinds of concerns that have emerged under COVID. And I worry about the distraction from that. On the other hand, I think the opportunity or the hope is that it, especially as awful as it is to see what's going on, that people may begin to wake up and realize, whoa, this is already happening, and whoa, it's going to get so much worse. I mean, I keep thinking, I look at my daughter, right? And I think, she's 20, and like, what is her life going to be like? What are her kids' lives going to be like? Yeah. And if they're as awful as they are likely to be, that is going to be our fault. It is the fault of this generation that has the opportunity to solve this problem, that is choosing not to for reasons that are unfathomable to me. And that's, again, the just behind that title, like, you're right, like fiddling while the world is literally burning.
Right. So 2 quick questions here in the time that we have remaining. I mean, I have a 16-year-old daughter as well who is beside herself over everything that's going on. And I think, given Black Lives Matter and the social unrest, where does advocacy in your mind fit in this? Because I know this is something that you think is very important. So we've got about a minute, and then I wanted to close with a real quick question for a quick. Where does advocacy? Is it important? Not important? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. So first, again, as a lead-in, I would note part of the claim here is these are not zero-sum choices.
Right.
I'm not saying you can't work on these other things because you have to work on climate. I would say the opposite. You have to work on all these things, and we do have the resources for it if we deploy them intelligently. So that's one. Advocacy, of course, is pivotal, particularly in the United States. I mean, this is a global problem, so the role of advocacy differs depending on where you are. You're going to advocate differently in China than you do in India, than you do in the United States, than you do in Brazil, than you do in Europe, and so on. But what we're fundamentally talking about is not things that philanthropy is going to do. It's ways in which philanthropy can help other institutions, in particular the private sector and governments, do the things that they need to do to address that. And that's fundamentally an advocacy problem. So
right.
we have the research, we need more. We have most of the solutions, we need more. With respect to the solutions we have, we need to begin to get them adopted and implemented. With respect to the solutions that we don't, we need to get investment in the research and the development for all of those things. So all of that entails a mix of advocacy and other kinds of technical support that we can provide.
Okay, 30 seconds. At the end of all of these, I always ask, what are the 2 takeaways? If anything else sinks in, what are the 2 takeaways that you want to leave with our listeners? 30 seconds.
One, absolute necessity to get involved, to do something meaningful in this space, and to clear out sufficient resources to do that. And number 2 is to do that intelligently. So what we do not need is people reading a book and saying, oh, it's the food is the problem, so I'm going to go do some weird thing off by myself. It's like, this is what CLI is there for. Talk to the people who have been working on this for a long time to understand and find out where the biggest needs are and where you can help as part of the larger collaborative.
Okay, so unfortunately we've come to the end of our time. Larry, thank you so much for kicking the session off.
Thank you for giving me the chance.
Yeah, this has been really great, greatly appreciated. And so we transition. Welcome everyone. Our next session is the complex challenge and why the complex challenge related to climate change and why it matters. We have Paul Hawken and a familiar face at GPF will also be there, Jane Wales, for this very important conversation. I'm very much looking forward to that conversation as well. It's going to begin at 8:30. I've got a note here that says our conference platform is still having some technical issues. So if you would just continue to use the email that you received, that would be very helpful. And Megan, I think, who's our great GPF director, and our team will let everyone know if there's a change. So with that, everyone, thank you very much. Have an incredibly productive 3 days. And I look forward to talking with all of you during the conference. So we'll sign off for now. Thank you.